Everything you thought you knew about hip-hop's most legendary rivalries just got flipped upside down, and the internet is in full meltdown mode. A few seconds of newly surfaced footage rumored to be tied to 50 Cent's upcoming documentary has ignited one of the darkest, most controversial conversations the culture has seen in years. Fans aren't just talking anymore, they're dissecting, decoding, and drawing connections that feel impossible to ignore. According to viral claims spreading online, the footage hints at a behind-the-scenes moment involving Diddy and Eminem that some viewers interpret as far more sinister than anyone expected. No official confirmation, no verified evidence, but once the rumor caught fire, it spread like gasoline on a spark. Old interviews resurfaced overnight. Lyrics were replayed with new meaning. Clips people ignored for decades are suddenly being treated like hidden clues. Then the story took another turn when Kirk Burrowes' name entered the conversation, with screenshots circulating that fans claim show him backing part of the narrative. Whether those posts are real or taken out of context hasn't been proven, but that hasn't stopped social media from exploding. Twitter turned into a battlefield. TikTok breakdowns hit millions of views. Comment sections filled with people saying, "This explains everything," while others warned, "This is going too far." And through it all, the most chilling detail remains the same: the silence. No denials, no clarifications, just speculation growing louder by the hour. Is this the internet creating another conspiracy? Or did one rumored documentary clip crack open a story that was never meant to surface? Because if even a fraction of these claims are true, this isn't just rap beef. This is something much darker, and the fallout is only beginning. The moment those alleged documentary whispers hit social media, the timeline didn't just react, it detonated. What started as a few cryptic posts claiming new footage from 50 Cent's documentary existed quickly turned into a full-blown cultural panic. Nobody had seen an official clip. Nobody could confirm a source, but somehow everyone felt like something heavy was being implied, and the internet moved faster than facts ever could. It began with a short, grainy video circulating on X and TikTok, supposedly pulled from a private screening or early cut of 50 Cent's project. The clip itself didn't show anything explicit. No weapons, no threats, no names spoken clearly, but fans swore the language, the pauses, the expressions, all of it felt loaded. People started saying, "Listen to how he says that." Others slowed the audio down, isolated phrases, zoomed into background faces, and convinced themselves they were witnessing a coded confession rather than a casual industry story. Within hours, captions turned extreme. "This explains Eminem's paranoia back then. Why did 50 wait this long to let this out? This is why certain people never crossed certain lines." None of it backed by proof, but repeated so often it began to feel real to those consuming it nonstop. Hip-hop forums lit up with decade-old threads being revived, users pulling archived interviews where Eminem talked about feeling unsafe early in his career, or where 50 Cent joked about industry politics being deadly. Jokes that once felt metaphorical were suddenly being reinterpreted as literal warnings. As the speculation spiraled, Diddy's name became the center of gravity, not because of anything new he'd said or done, but because fans began connecting dots backward. Old rivalries, old business conflicts, old quotes taken out of context. One viral post claimed, without evidence, that people in power used fear back then, not contracts. That line alone was reposted tens of thousands of times, each time with more certainty attached to it, as if repetition could turn implication into fact. Then came the Kirk Burrowes angle, the moment the story shifted from wild fan theory into something people treated like validation. Screenshots began circulating of an alleged comment or DM where Burrowes was said to have confirmed parts of the rumor. The authenticity of these screenshots was immediately questioned, but that didn't slow anything down. In fact, the doubt made it worse. Half the internet believed the screenshots were fake. The other half treated them like gospel. And both sides argued like the truth depended on winning the comment section. Reaction channels went live back-to-back, some warning viewers that this was all reckless speculation, others leaning fully into the shock value. "If this is true, it changes everything," became the most repeated sentence across platforms, but always followed by the same quiet caveat. If no one could confirm the footage was real, no one could confirm Burrowes actually said what was being attributed to him, and no one could confirm any criminal intent whatsoever. But confirmation stopped mattering once the story took on a life of its own. What fueled the fire even more was the complete lack of response from anyone directly involved. No statement from 50 Cent clarifying the footage. No response from Diddy's camp. No reaction from Eminem. Silence became the loudest sound in the room, and people began projecting meaning onto that silence. If it wasn't true, they'd shut it down. Legal teams move quietly. You don't joke about this unless there's something behind it. Each assumption stacked on top of the last, forming a narrative built entirely on interpretation. Meanwhile, longtime fans of Eminem revisited moments from his career that now felt eerie through this new lens. Lyrics about paranoia, lines about watching his back, interviews where he spoke about moving with heavy security early on. None of it proof of anything, but all of it suddenly recontextualized by a rumor that refused to die. People weren't saying Eminem confirmed anything. They were saying the vibes now made sense, and that distinction blurred faster than anyone could correct it. At the same time, supporters of Diddy pushed back hard, calling the entire situation irresponsible and dangerous. They pointed out that hip-hop history is full of exaggerated storytelling, metaphors, and bravado. They warned that treating internet speculation like fact could have real-world consequences. But their voices were often drowned out by the sheer volume of shock-driven content. Outrage travels faster than caution, and this story was engineered by the algorithm to thrive on outrage. As the first wave of chaos settled, a new layer emerged, people claiming there was more footage, longer footage, unedited footage, footage that would never be released publicly. Anonymous accounts teased drops that never came. Others claimed the documentary was being held up because of what it contained. Again, no evidence, just implications stacked on implications. And yet, millions believed they were on the brink of witnessing one of the darkest revelations in hip-hop history. By the end of this phase, the story had fully transformed. It was no longer about a documentary. It was about power, fear, and the mythology of the music industry. People weren't asking what was proven. They were asking what felt believable. And in an era where distrust of institutions runs deep, feeling believable was enough. But just as the internet settled into its chosen sides, something else began to happen quietly. Commentators started noticing inconsistencies. Timelines didn't line up. Quotes were misattributed. Screenshots traced back to parody accounts. And the confidence that once fueled the rumor began to crack, even as the conversation grew louder. Because the deeper people dug, the more one uncomfortable truth surfaced. This story might not be exposing a hidden crime at all. It might be exposing how fast speculation can mutate into something far more dangerous when fear, fame, and silence collide. And just as doubt started creeping in, another alleged confirmation began circulating, pushing the chaos into an entirely new phase no one was prepared for. As the second wave hit, the conversation didn't cool down, it mutated. What had started as raw speculation hardened into something far more dangerous: certainty without proof. This was the moment where people stopped asking if the story was real and started arguing about why it had been hidden. And once a narrative reaches that stage, it no longer needs evidence to survive. The spark for this escalation came from a sudden flood of context clips. Accounts began posting side-by-side videos, old 50 Cent interviews, Eminem freestyles, Diddy speeches, industry roundtables from the early 2000s. None of these clips said anything criminal. None of them mentioned violence outright. But when edited together with dramatic music and ominous captions, They felt like pieces of a puzzle viewers were desperate to solve. Watch how he pauses here. Notice who he doesn't mention. This line hits different now. These were the phrases driving engagement, and engagement was driving belief. Then came the reinterpretation of 50 Cent himself. Fans started framing him not just as a provocateur, but as a long-term strategist. Someone who waits. Someone who plants seeds years before they grow. Old jokes he made about the industry being dangerous were suddenly treated like foreshadowing. His long-running habit of trolling powerful figures was rebranded as telling the truth through humor. Again, nothing new was actually revealed, but perception shifted rapidly. The alleged Kirk Burrowes confirmation evolved too. New screenshots appeared, supposedly expanding on the earlier ones. Some showed longer messages. Others claimed voice notes existed. None were verified. Some were debunked within hours. But the debunks never traveled as far as the claims. People who wanted to believe treated every denial as damage control. People who didn't believe were accused of being naive or complicit. The middle ground disappeared almost overnight. What made this phase especially volatile was how often the word hit was being used, not by any official source, but by commentators and fans summarizing rumors in the most extreme language possible. Responsible creators tried to reframe it as alleged intimidation narratives or dangerous industry rumors. But the algorithm rewarded the most shocking phrasing, and so the language escalated, even as the facts remained non-existent. At the same time, Eminem's silence became its own storyline. Fans argued endlessly over what it meant. Some said silence implied legal boundaries. Others said it meant he didn't want to legitimize nonsense. A darker corner of the internet claimed silence meant fear, a claim with absolutely no basis, but repeated so often it began to feel normalized. This was the most alarming turn, because it showed how easily speculation could slip into character assassination. Meanwhile, voices from hip-hop's older generation tried to inject perspective. A few podcasters reminded audiences that the early 2000s were filled with exaggerated bravado, especially in street-coded language. They warned that metaphors were being flattened into literal accusations. But their caution was drowned out by the louder, faster, more sensational voices declaring, "This is bigger than rap." Then the documentary itself became the target. People began claiming it was being suppressed. That lawyers were involved. That networks were panicking. None of this was confirmed, yet it spread like wildfire. Screenshots of fake emails circulated. Timelines speculated about release delays that never existed. The absence of information was interpreted as proof of interference rather than proof of rumor. As pressure mounted, some creators started walking things back quietly. Videos were deleted. Titles were softened. Comments were limited. That alone fueled another wave of speculation. "Why delete if it's fake?" became the rallying cry. In reality, many were simply reacting to the legal and ethical danger of repeating unverified claims. But the internet read retreat as validation. The most unsettling part of this phase was watching how quickly the human element disappeared. Eminem, Diddy, and even 50 Cent became symbols rather than people. Their real lives, families, and histories were flattened into archetypes. Villain, target, truth-teller, nuance vanished. Complexity was inconvenient. The story demanded sides. By the end of this stretch, the conversation had reached a tipping point. It was no longer about a rumored clip. It was about power structures, secrecy, and fear, themes that resonate deeply in a culture already suspicious of institutions. The rumor survived not because it was proven, but because it fit a narrative people were ready to believe. And just when it seemed like the story couldn't get more distorted, a final claim began circulating, one suggesting that someone close to the situation was preparing to go on record. No name, no date, just the promise of clarity. That promise was enough to keep millions watching, refreshing, and waiting, even as the line between investigation and imagination grew thinner by the minute. By the time the third phase unfolded, the story had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. It stopped being about the rumor and became a case study in how narratives turn into perceived reality. The conversation wasn't slowing down. It was hardening. People weren't refreshing their feeds looking for proof anymore. They were looking for confirmation of what they had already decided to believe. This was the stage where someone close to the situation became the most dangerous phrase on the internet. Anonymous accounts claimed insiders were preparing statements. Others teased that a second voice would soon speak up. Again, no names, no sources, no documentation, but anticipation alone kept the story alive. The idea that clarity was coming made every pause feel intentional, every silence feel loaded. At the same time, a quieter counter-narrative began forming among more cautious observers. Journalists, legal commentators, and veteran industry insiders started pushing back, not loudly, but deliberately. They pointed out inconsistencies that were now impossible to ignore. The alleged documentary footage had never been authenticated. The screenshots attributed to Kirk Burrowes traced back to accounts that changed usernames frequently. Quotes being passed around were often misattributed or stitched together from unrelated interviews. Slowly, the scaffolding holding the rumor up began to show cracks. But cracks don't stop a wildfire, they just change its direction. Instead of asking whether the claims were true, people pivoted to asking why such rumors felt believable. This is where the conversation took a deeper, more unsettling turn. Fans began talking about power imbalance in the music industry, about how fear and intimidation are often spoken about metaphorically, and how those metaphors can be misunderstood or weaponized. The story morphed from a specific accusation into a symbolic narrative about how the industry operates behind closed doors. That shift gave the rumor longevity. Even if the specific claim couldn't be proven, the idea behind it resonated with people who already distrusted the system. And in that environment, denial didn't feel reassuring, it felt expected. Silence wasn't neutral, it was interpreted as strategy. The absence of evidence wasn't calming, it was framed as suppression. Meanwhile, creators who had initially leaned into the most extreme framing began issuing clarifications. Some added disclaimers. Others pinned comments reminding viewers that nothing had been confirmed. A few openly apologized for overstating claims, but those corrections rarely traveled as far as the original headlines. The damage had already been done. In the attention economy, the first impression always wins. What became most alarming was how quickly the conversation lost empathy. Eminem was no longer discussed as a human being with a career and family. He became a symbol of survival. Diddy stopped being a person and became an avatar of power. 50 Cent became the narrator people projected intentions onto, regardless of what he had actually said or released. Everyone was flattened into roles the audience assigned them. Then came the moment of reckoning, when people began asking whether repeating these rumors was ethical at all. A few prominent voices questioned whether the story had crossed into something genuinely harmful. They warned that unverified allegations involving violence could have real-world consequences. They reminded audiences that documentaries are often edited, dramatized, and interpreted wildly, differently depending on who's watching. And yet, even those warnings struggled to compete with the momentum. Because once a story taps into fear, mystery, and power, it doesn't need facts, it needs belief. As days passed without any official confirmation, a subtle shift occurred. The volume dipped, but the conviction among believers intensified. Those who remained engaged weren't casual observers anymore, they were invested. They argued fiercely, defended their interpretations, and dismissed skepticism as ignorance. This is the point where rumors stop being information and start becoming identity. Eventually, the conversation reached a strange stalemate. No new footage dropped. No insider came forward publicly. No confirmations arrived. And yet, the story didn't disappear. It settled into the background like a myth, something referenced, hinted at, and invoked whenever discussions about power and secrecy in hip-hop resurfaced. What remained wasn't an exposed truth, but a lesson. A reminder of how easily speculation can escalate when it intersects with fame, silence, and distrust. How quickly interpretation can outrun verification. And how dangerous it can be when entertainment blurs into accusation. In the end, the most important takeaway wasn't about any one person. It was about responsibility of creators, viewers, and platforms alike. Because stories like this don't just live online. They affect real people, real reputations, and real lives. And while the internet will move on to the next controversy, this moment will linger as a warning. Not that secrets always exist, but that when we're hungry for them, we're willing to create them ourselves. The rumor may fade, but the pattern remains. If you're still watching right now, understand this. You didn't just follow a viral rumor. You watched how narratives are born, amplified, and locked into public memory. Stories like this don't disappear when the noise dies down. They resurface later, reshaped, reinterpreted, and often accepted as truth by people who never saw how shaky the foundation was to begin with. If this breakdown made you pause, question, or rethink how fast speculation can spiral, hit the like button. That tells the algorithm this conversation deserves nuance, not just shock value. Engagement isn't about drama, it's about responsibility. Now head to the comments and say what you really think. Do you believe the internet went too far with this story? Or do you think silence from powerful figures always fuels speculation? Was this a lesson in media literacy, or proof that narratives don't need facts to survive? Your perspective matters more than you think, and others are reading closely. And most importantly, subscribe right now. Not because you want more chaos, but because stories like this evolve quietly. Corrections come late. Clarifications surface when attention has moved on. If real updates drop, if verified information emerges, or if someone finally speaks on record, you'll want to hear it from a place that separates reaction from reality. Stay curious, stay critical, and stay connected, because the most important part of any story is knowing when to question it.